There's a cave on Mount Everest at 27,900 feet. For nearly 2 decades, every climber who passed it faces the same haunting sight. A man in green boots, frozen in time, forever resting in his limestone tomb. Some touched his boots for luck, others left prayer flags. Most tried not to look, but those who saw him never forgot him. The story begins in 1996, the deadliest year in Everest's history. While the world's attention was captured by the disaster unfolding on the mountain's south face, something equally tragic was happening on the north side. 3 men vanished in a storm that would reshape mountaineering history. Only one would become a legend. This is the story of how a quiet young man from a small Himalayan village became the mountain's most famous resident. But it's also a story about why we climb, why we risk everything to stand on top of the world, and what happens when things go horribly wrong. The beginning. Ladakh means land of high passes. Here, at 12,500 feet, where prayer flags flutter in thin mountain air and ancient monasteries cling to mountainsides, Tsewang Paljor was born in a world already closer to the stars than most of us will ever be. His family's modest farm barely provided enough to survive, but their pride in Paljor was boundless. Every certificate, every medal from his climbing achievements found a place of honor on his mother's shelves. For Paljor, each summit was a step towards giving his family something more than survival. He was the quiet one, the middle child of 5 who never had a girlfriend. Too shy, his brother said. But in the mountains, Paljor found his voice. Away from the village's narrow lanes and watchful eyes, he discovered something that would change his life forever. The pure joy of climbing higher than anyone thought possible. The path. At 18, Paljor joined the Indo-Tibetan Border Police, an elite force tasked with patrolling some of the world's most treacherous terrain. Here, at altitudes that would leave most people gasping for breath, he thrived. His commanding officers noticed something special about the quiet young man from Ladakh, a natural ability to move through thin air, as if he was born for it. Paljor was head constable, and his job provided him with the training and experience necessary to climb Mount Everest. His younger brother, Tinley, remembers, "We used to play around and kick his tummy because it was like a rock. I always thought of him as Superman. In my mind, he could do anything." The Border Police wasn't just a job, it was a pathway to Paljor's dreams. Every successful summit brought new certificates and medals home to his mother. Each one was a promise of something bigger to come. But Paljor had his eyes on the ultimate prize, the one mountain that could change everything, Mount Everest. The dream. In 1996, an opportunity arose that would test the limits of Paljor's ability and his family's faith in him. The Indo-Tibetan Border Police were assembling a team for a historic attempt to become the first Indians to summit Everest from the treacherous north side. It was a chance for glory, for a better life for his family. But the risks were enormous. He told a small lie, his mother later recalled. He said he was going to climb a different mountain, but word got back to us that he was climbing Everest. I begged him not to go. Team leader Mohinder Singh saw something special in the quiet 28-year-old from Ladakh. Paljor wanted to do many things in his life, Singh would later recall. He looked like a monkey when he climbed, always volunteering for the most difficult jobs. He was very helpful like that. The climb. May 10, 1996. Camp 4, 27,000 feet. While most of the world slept, 26 climbers were preparing to move towards Everest's summit from both sides of the mountain. None of them knew that they were about to witness one of the deadliest days in climbing history. As dozens of expeditions gathered at Everest's base camps, 2 teams on opposite sides of the mountain were about to make history. While Rob Hall and Scott Fisher's commercial teams prepared their assault from the south, Paljor and his 6-person team readied themselves for the north face. In the death zone above, timing is everything. Every minute wasted burns precious oxygen. Every hour lost brings the threat of afternoon storms closer. When Paljor's team overslept on May 10th, missing their 3:30 a.m. start time by nearly 5 hours, they should have turned back. At that altitude, veteran climber and Everest guide Russell Bryce explains, every step feels like running a marathon with a plastic bag over your head. Your mind plays tricks on you. Summit fever is real. It makes you believe you can push just a little further, just a little longer. 2:30 p.m. Team leader Mohinder Singh's voice crackled through the radio, fighting against the rising wind. The storm clouds gathering behind his men looked like a dark tide rolling in. The weather is very deceptive, bad, he pleaded. But at 28,000 feet, even the clearest warnings can be lost in the thin, freezing air. Summit fever had taken hold. While 3 teammates turned back, Paljor and 2 others pressed on towards the summit, disappearing in the gathering clouds. At 5:35 p.m., far later than any experienced climber would have considered safe, 3 voices broke through the static. They'd reached the summit, but in the mountains, the summit is only the halfway point. The same brutal storm that was about to kill 5 climbers on the south side now engulfed the north. In a storm at that altitude, Bryce explains, you can't see your hand in front of your face. The wind sounds like a freight train. It's not just about climbing anymore. It's about survival. In the gathering darkness, 2 headlamps were spotted moving just above the second steps at 28,000 feet. They would be the last signs of life from Paljor and his teammates. The mountain then went silent, and in that silence, a mystery was born that would haunt Everest for decades. The discovery. The first climbers to find the cave thought they'd discovered just another emergency shelter. Then they saw the boots, neon green against the limestone and snow. No one knows for certain what happened in Paljor's final hours. What choices led him to seek shelter in that particular cave? Every time I pass the cave, it sends shivers down my spine, wrote British climber David Sharp. You look at his boots first, neon green against the white snow. Then you realize you're looking at a person, someone who never made it home. In a cruel twist of fate, Sharp would later die in that same cave in 2006, seeking shelter in the final hours of his own ill-fated summit attempt. The cave that had become famous for one tragedy now held another. Getting to Green Boots means you're in the death zone, one Sherpa explained. When you see him, you know you have about 2 hours to the summit, if everything goes right. But he's also a warning. This is what happens if things go wrong. Pete Athens, a veteran guide who summited Everest 7 times, describes it bluntly. You have to make a conscious decision to step over or around him. It's not like you don't see him. There's no way just to walk by. The impact. Back in Ladakh, when the border police showed up at his mother's door, they told her Paljor was missing on Everest and promised to send search parties and helicopters. But at that altitude, rescues almost never work. In 2011, Paljor's brother, Tinley, found photos of green boots online. I was shocked, he said. I never wanted my family to know about this. I pray my mom never finds out. She couldn't handle it. A Sherpa guide explained, when clients ask about him, I tell them the truth. That's someone's son up there. We use him as a marker, yes, but we never forget that he was a person who had the same dreams as everyone else on this mountain. For nearly 2 decades, Green Boots remained exactly as he was found, a silent sentinel in his limestone cave. Then in 2014, something changed. Climbers approaching the familiar cave found it empty. Some claimed Chinese authorities moved him somewhere more private. Others reported seeing him still there in 2017, just covered with more rocks. The mountain had kept one final secret. What happened to the man in the green boots? Every year, hundreds still line up to climb Everest. They've all heard about the disasters of 1996. They know about Green Boots and the others still up there. But they come anyway. Something keeps pulling people back to this mountain. Back home in Ladakh, Paljor's mother tends to her garden. His medals still sit on her shelves. A child is priceless, she says. Money is nothing. But we are the affected family. I lost my child. People often ask why anyone would risk their life to climb Everest. For Paljor, it was a mix of things, wanting to make history, hoping to give his family a better life, and proving something to himself. Every climber who passes that cave in the death zone faces the same question. What dream would you risk everything for? Maybe it's because we're all drawn to things that scare us. Or maybe it's about testing our limits, seeing what we're really made of. For some people, that means climbing the world's highest peak. For others, it's something completely different. Paljor's story isn't just about death on Everest. It's about a man who dared to dream big, maybe too big. But in the end, that's what makes his story so human. Because we all have that voice inside us, pushing us to do more, to reach higher. The trick is figuring out which risks are worth taking. In 1996, 5 people died on Everest's south side. Their story became famous. Books, movies, you name it. But on the north side, 3 men from India died chasing the same dream. One of them was Tsewang Paljor. Now you know his name.